I was peeling back the foil on my turkey sandwich when I saw them through the break room window. Two people in dark navy suits, clipboards in hand, standing beside my cubicle like it belonged to them. One of them was taking photos of my monitor. The other had a pair of latex gloves on and was pulling open drawers. They moved with practiced precision, like this wasn't the first time they'd torn apart someone's workspace. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was no rush of confusion or fear. I just knew. Tessa Carmichael had finally done it. I watched them for a few seconds, chewing slowly, as if nothing unusual was happening. The office beyond the glass was quiet, sterile. But this moment had been building for months, and I wasn't about to let it catch me off guard. I folded the foil back over the sandwich and walked out of the break room, keeping my pace even. The taller officer looked up from my filing cabinet when I stopped in front of them. He had a polite but unreadable expression. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, "we're conducting a routine inspection based on reports of potential workplace violations." "Routine, right," I said, my voice steady. I already knew what reports he meant, and I already knew exactly who had filed them. 3 cubicles away, Tessa was pretending to organize folders, but her eyes never left the scene. She stood perfectly still, just within earshot, her body angled to appear casual. I could almost hear the anticipation humming in her chest. This was her big moment, the one she had engineered piece by piece. The shorter officer glanced at his notes without looking up. Unprofessional conduct, systematic errors in client communication, potential safety concerns in workspace organization. I kept my expression neutral. My desk had been my desk for years. Same monitor, same chair, same drawer layout. I knew exactly what they'd find and, more importantly, what they wouldn't. "We'll need to complete the inspection before you return to your workstation," the officer added. "Of course," I said. I wasn't here to resist. Behind me, the soft hum of the office carried on. But it felt different now, a little quieter, a little more alert, like the air had shifted just slightly. And everyone was waiting to see where it would land. I didn't look at Tessa. I didn't need to. She was exactly where she wanted to be, watching, calculating, imagining how the story would end. But what she didn't realize was that the ending she'd been writing wasn't the one that would unfold. This wasn't the beginning of my downfall. It was the first scene in a completely different story. I've been at the company for 9 years. In that time, I've handled some of our most delicate client accounts, high value, high stakes, the kind where one mistake could cost more than my annual salary. I never chased credit for it. I didn't need my name announced in meetings or my numbers flashed across the screen. I did my work, I did it well, and I went home. That's what made me a threat. Tessa Carmichael joined the company 3 years ago. She was quick, sharp, and ambitious in a way that filled a room. From her first week, it was clear she wasn't here to learn the ropes. She was here to stand out. And I think she expected the path to success to be loud. She introduced herself in every meeting, even the ones where she wasn't invited. She chimed in during presentations. Even if the topic didn't concern her, she complimented supervisors on their management style during one-on-one calls she wasn't supposed to be on. When she noticed I handled accounts with 7 figures attached, something shifted. At first, it was subtle, offhand comments about how she would have approached things differently. Gentle corrections in meetings she wasn't leading. Then it escalated. She began forwarding my emails to our manager with unnecessary corrections circled. Grammar mistakes that didn't exist. Slight wording preferences framed as critical communication issues. She once volunteered to help with one of my project summaries. When the final version came back, it was barely recognizable, bloated with buzzwords, stripped of the clarity I'd built in. When I politely pushed back, she smiled, said she just wanted the team to shine. What bothered her most, though, wasn't what I did wrong. It was what I did right, quietly. When I closed a major client renewal, I didn't announce it. When a customer sent a handwritten thank you card, I tucked it into a drawer. When upper management complimented my handling of a delicate issue, I nodded, said thank you, and got back to work. Tessa couldn't stand that because she couldn't compete with something she couldn't measure. She needed spotlight. I didn't. That made me unpredictable, untouchable. So she started watching me. She noted the times I arrived in the morning, when I took lunch, how long I spent in the break room. She walked by my desk more often, glancing at my screen like she was just passing through. She'd ask questions that sounded innocent: what system I used to track renewals, how I organized my inbox, what my notes looked like during calls. Then she'd imply I might be doing it wrong, that my methods weren't aligned with best practices. At first, I thought she was just competitive, a little overeager, but it became obvious. She was building something, not her own success, a case against mine. That was when I stopped waiting for her to back off. I knew what she was doing. I understood the story she was trying to tell, so I made a decision. I would let her write it, and I would make sure the ending told the truth. I started noticing the patterns before I even meant to. The way Tessa's questions shifted from casual to calculated. The way she lingered near my desk just long enough to catch what was on my screen. The way she always seemed to know when I took my breaks, when I got in early, when I left 5 minutes later than usual. It wasn't curiosity. It was documentation. She never asked anything twice. She didn't need to. She was keeping records, mentally at first. Then I suspected, more formally. One afternoon, I saw her slip a manila folder into her drawer, labeled with a single name in neat block letters, mine. I wasn't surprised. By then, I knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't trying to outperform me. She was building a case, quietly, carefully. She understood that one explosive mistake might be easy to explain away, but a pattern of smaller ones, subtle enough to seem plausible, consistent enough to suggest negligence. That was something she could weaponize. And I understood the game, but I also knew she was playing it alone. So I gave her exactly what she needed. A missed day on an internal calendar, a file named incorrectly, off by 1 digit, a line in an email where I used the wrong version of affect, small enough to correct without issue, visible enough to get noticed. I'd send a client summary with Thursday listed, then send a follow-up an hour later correcting it to Friday. I'd drop a spreadsheet into the wrong team folder, then move it back the next day with a note. My mistake, fixed. I was never reckless, never dishonest, just slightly imprecise. Breadcrumbs. She followed every one. There was a day I walked past her desk while she was in the break room. Her computer screen was unlocked. That folder was open. Performance documentation. N. Rodriguez. Inside were screenshots of my emails, annotated with red circles, notes in her handwriting about my inconsistencies, printouts of internal memos with the tiniest corrections highlighted, like proof of systemic issues. It would have been laughable if it weren't so calculated. She thought she was catching me slipping, but what she didn't realize was I had already chosen the direction of the fall. And she was chasing shadows I deliberately placed in front of her. I never told anyone what I saw on her screen. I didn't report it. I didn't confront her. Because none of it was enough to hurt me, not yet. And exposing her would have only reset the board. No. I needed her to keep building, keep watching, keep believing she was winning, because while she was collecting mistakes, I was collecting something else. And when the time came, we'd both open our folders. Only one of us would have anything worth reading. It started as something small, just a way to stay grounded. I had been listening to a podcast on the train one morning, one of those quiet, thoughtful ones about productivity and resilience. The host mentioned a daily gratitude practice, nothing complicated, just 3 simple reflections at the end of each workday, moments of kindness, instances of professionalism, signs that what you do matters, even in small ways. I didn't expect it to change anything. I certainly didn't expect it to protect me. I kept a soft leather notebook in my desk drawer, right next to the pens and spare sticky notes. At the end of each day, I would write down 3 things that made the hours feel worthwhile. A client who thanked me for resolving a complex issue without making them feel foolish. A teammate who offered help on a difficult report without being asked. A manager who noticed the extra time I'd spent preparing a presentation and took a moment to say so. Sometimes the entries were short, 1 sentence, a line or 2. Sometimes they were longer, little snapshots of human decency in an environment that could be cold and transactional. I didn't write every day, but I tried, not out of obligation, but because it started to feel good to notice. Over time, a pattern began to form. I found myself writing down the same names again and again. Daniel from accounting, who patiently walked me through a software update, twice. Alicia in HR, who always asked how my day was going and meant it. Even Mr. Walsh, our supervisor, for being consistent and fair in his feedback, even when it wasn't what I wanted to hear. No one knew about the journal. It wasn't for public recognition. It wasn't to be shared. It was just a quiet place for reflection, something to remind myself that even on hard days, there were still people who showed up with integrity. Months went by. The notebook filled steadily. The pages softened from use. And then one afternoon, I flipped back through it, looking for something. I didn't know what I was searching for until I realized what was missing. There were entries for interns and executives, janitors and vendors, people who barely knew my name and people I spoke to every day. But there was one name that hadn't appeared, not once. In hundreds of reflections across nearly 18 months, there was no mention of Tessa Carmichael. It wasn't deliberate. I hadn't excluded her on purpose. But as I scanned page after page, the truth became unavoidable. She had never done a single thing that warranted gratitude. Not one helpful gesture. Not one collaborative moment. Not one instance of authentic professionalism. Tessa existed in our office like a shadow, always present, always watching, never contributing warmth or light. I stared at the notebook for a long time that day, not because I planned to use it, not because I thought it would matter, but because I had accidentally created a record of something real, something that no performance file could fake. While she was documenting mistakes, I had been documenting people, and the difference would become undeniable. It happened on a Tuesday. I had just stepped out for lunch. Nothing fancy, just a walk around the block to clear my head and pick up something quick. When I came back, the energy in the office felt off, subtly different. Not louder or quieter exactly, just sharper, like the air was listening. I turned the corner toward my cubicle and saw them, the same 2 compliance officers from before, standing over my workspace with calm authority. One was flipping through folders. The other was scrolling through my email archive on my monitor. Everything about them said this wasn't casual. They didn't look up when I approached. Not at first. But I didn't interrupt. I already knew why they were there. Tessa had made her move. She had submitted her file, her carefully curated packet of my minor mistakes, inconsistencies, and red circles. She had convinced our manager in compliance that I posed a risk to our team's standards. And she had requested that the inspection be done while I was away. So I wouldn't have the chance to tidy anything up or remove evidence. What she hadn't counted on was what they'd actually find. The shorter officer opened my bottom drawer. Among the paper clips and spare chargers was the journal. He held it up, glancing at the cover. Just some personal notes, I said quietly. Thoughts about work. He nodded, then opened it. At first, he skimmed, then he slowed down. His partner leaned over to look. They exchanged a glance that was unreadable but deliberate. Then they both sat down, right there at my desk, and started reading. Not flipping, reading, page by page, line by line. The noise in the office dimmed. Conversations faded. Phones went unanswered. People started noticing. Something was happening. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15, and still they read. I stood nearby, pretending to check emails on my phone. But I could feel every eye on me, even the ones pretending not to look. Then I saw her. Tessa had edged closer, hovering a few feet away, holding a folder she wasn't reading. Her posture was stiff, her eyes locked on the journal. I wondered what she thought they were reading, probably expected to find something unethical, inappropriate, something she could twist. Instead, they found gratitude. At the 20-minute mark, the shorter officer looked up at me. "Miss Rodriguez, how long have you been keeping this journal?" "About 18 months, I said. "And these entries, they're all real? You're not inventing or exaggerating?" "No," I said, surprised by the question. "They're just small moments I wanted to remember. Not for anyone else, just for me." He nodded, then stood up. Without a word, he walked over to Tessa. "Miss Carmichael," he said, "could we speak with you privately?" She froze for a split second, like she hadn't expected the spotlight to turn. Then she followed them into the glass-walled conference room at the end of the floor. Everyone watched. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I didn't need to. Inside the room, the expressions shifted. Tessa's posture changed, her arms crossed. Her mouth moved faster. Her eyes darted, then dropped. Then the silence came. The kind of silence that says everything. When the three of them finally returned, nearly 30 minutes had passed. Tessa's face was pale, her eyes red. She didn't look at anyone. She walked straight back to her desk, set the folder down, and sat like someone trying not to be seen. The officers returned to me. "Miss Rodriguez," the shorter one said, "we've completed our review. There are no findings of misconduct or policy violations." I nodded once, calm, composed. But I knew something had shifted. The trap that had been set for me had quietly, completely, and unmistakably closed around her. I thought it might be over. After the investigation closed, Tessa didn't say a word. Not to me, not to anyone. As far as I could tell, she kept her head down, showed up on time, clicked through her tasks like she was trying to disappear. It was the quietest she'd ever been. For a moment, I let myself believe it was done. But people like Tessa don't retreat. They recalibrate. 3 days later, Daniel from accounting stopped by my desk. He had a coffee in one hand and a furrowed look in his eyes. "Hey, Natalie," he said, keeping his voice low. "Can I ask you something a little weird?" "Of course. Did you know Tessa's been asking people about your journal?" I froze. Not completely, but something in my chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "She cornered me in the break room yesterday, asked if I knew you were writing about coworkers, if I thought it was appropriate, if I felt okay being written about without consent." My stomach sank. "What did you say?" I told her I think it's a good thing, that it's nice someone notices when people are kind or helpful. But she's not just asking me. Alicia said she asked her, too, even Mr. Walsh. Daniel looked around, then leaned in a little closer. "She's trying to make it sound creepy, like you're keeping files on people. Like it's some kind of surveillance. She's calling it a privacy concern. Maybe even a form of harassment." It was almost impressive, in a twisted way. She'd failed to take me down through official channels, so now she was trying something subtler, whisper campaigns, mistrust disguised as concern, poison dressed up as policy. She couldn't accept the outcome of the investigation, so she was rewriting the story. And once again, I had a choice. I could defend myself, call meetings, argue with people, try to undo the damage one rumor at a time. But I knew how that would look. Desperate, defensive, like I had something to hide. Or I could do something else entirely. The next Monday morning, I drafted an email to the entire department. It was short, plain, honest. Hi, everyone. Some of you may have heard that I keep a personal gratitude journal. It's a private practice where I occasionally note positive moments from my workday, interactions that made the day better, or reminded me why I love what I do. It's never been shared with management or used for any formal purpose. It's just something I do to stay grounded and appreciative. That said, if you would prefer not to be included in any future entries, I completely respect that. Please let me know. It won't affect how I work with you. And your comfort matters to me. Best, Natalie. I hit send. Then I waited. An hour later, the first reply came in, then another, then 5 more. They weren't what I expected. Not questions, not complaints. Gratitude. People thanked me, said it was refreshing, said they hadn't realized how much small acknowledgments could matter. One person wrote that they were thinking of starting a journal themselves. Another said they'd never been mentioned. But just knowing someone was noticing the good things made them feel seen. By the end of the day, I had over 30 responses, all of them supportive. Except one. Tessa never replied. And somehow, that silence said more than any rumor ever could. Something shifted after that email. Not just around me, but around all of us. By Tuesday, small thank you notes started appearing on people's desks. Alicia from HR left one on Daniel's keyboard after he helped her with a budgeting report. Another showed up in the copy room, taped to the supply cabinet, thanking the facilities team for always keeping it stocked. They weren't flashy or formal, just sticky notes, a few words, but they spread fast. Daniel brought in cookies midweek, left them by the coffee machine with a handwritten sign that said, "For all the people who make this job easier." Alicia organized a casual lunch meetup just to say thanks to the newer staff for adapting so quickly. Even Mr. Walsh, our supervisor, started opening team meetings with a quick acknowledgement of someone who'd gone above and beyond that week. None of it was part of a policy. No one told anyone to do it. It just happened. The journal had stopped being mine. It had turned into something everyone wanted to be part of. And in that new atmosphere, something else became glaringly obvious. Tessa didn't fit. She tried. She said thank you more often. But it felt forced, like someone repeating words in a language she didn't speak. She handed out compliments that landed wrong, too pointed, too self-referential. That was a great job, especially considering how much I had to fix it last time. I'm really impressed. I didn't expect that from you. They weren't thank yous. They were reminders that she still needed to be in control of the narrative. She even tried starting her own version of a gratitude practice. She mentioned it loudly in the break room, said she was journaling now too, tracking how she uplifted others. But it didn't stick. Her entries, if she actually wrote them, weren't about seeing people. They were about being seen. And people noticed. In a culture suddenly focused on authentic appreciation, her behavior stood out more than ever. Not because it was cruel, but because it was hollow. I watched it happen from a distance, watched her smile too hard, force laughter at things she didn't find funny, look around to see who was watching instead of listening to who was speaking. She wasn't dangerous anymore. She was out of place. The same traits she used to leverage, dominance, critique, sharpness. They now made people uncomfortable, because when everyone else was lifting each other up, the sound of someone pulling others down felt louder. No one confronted her. No one needed to. The silence around her said enough. And for the first time since she arrived, Tessa was just another person in the office. No spotlight, no whisper campaign, no audience, just one more voice in a room that had started tuning itself to a different frequency, a better one. And all I had done was write down what I saw. A few weeks later, Walsh asked me to step into his office. His tone was neutral, But there was something in the way he closed the door behind me that told me this wasn't just another check-in. He didn't waste time. "Natalie," he said, "I wanted to thank you for introducing the gratitude practice to our team. The change in morale has been noticeable. I think it's helped people remember what we're working toward, together." I nodded, not quite sure where this was going, but he continued, "It's also brought some other things into focus." He slid a file across the desk. I didn't open it. "Over the past few months," he said, "we've had several small complaints come in, comments about tension, collaboration issues, difficult interactions. At first, they seemed disconnected, but after the investigation and everything that followed, I started seeing the pattern. I didn't have to ask who he meant. Tessa's name wasn't spoken, but it was there, printed between the lines. We've decided to reassign her to a different department. It's not a demotion. She'll still have a role that suits her strengths, but it's a team with less collaborative pressure. A better fit." I understood what that meant. It was a quiet move. No drama, no headlines, just a structural decision that changed everything. She wouldn't be in our meetings. She wouldn't hover by my desk. She wouldn't watch. She was being removed from the ecosystem she had tried so hard to manipulate. Miss Walsh leaned back. "The irony," he said, "is that the very investigation she initiated led us to a clearer understanding of what makes this team work. And your journal? It wasn't just a habit. It became a mirror. It reflected the real culture here. Who contributes? Who shows up? Who brings value that can't be measured in numbers alone? That's what helped us make this decision, not just policy, perspective." I sat there, quiet for a moment, letting it settle. He wasn't praising me for winning. There were no fireworks, just truth, unavoidable and quiet, like the work I'd always done. Tessa had spent months trying to prove I didn't belong, but in the end, all she'd done was show us why she didn't. She transferred out a few days later, no announcement. Just a line in the internal update email. "Staff reassignment effective immediately." I heard she asked to be moved to one of our regional offices. A fresh start, new faces. No history. I hope she finds what she's looking for. Because now, I understand. It was never really about me. It was about her. Her need to be seen, to feel superior, to prove she mattered. But in trying to tear me down, she made it impossible not to see what she had become. As for me, I still write in the journal, not every day, and not for protection anymore, but because it reminds me that the smallest moments matter. A thank you, a bit of patience, a name written down because it deserved to be remembered. Kindness leaves traces. And sometimes, the clearest revenge isn't loud or cruel or clever. It's simply creating a world where cruelty has nowhere left to hide.